Welcome to Putnam Memorial, a Connecticut state park, located in Redding, Connecticut. Nestled in the hills of western Connecticut is a landmark chapter of the American Revolution of which few people are aware. But for those who visit, the story is as large as the fight for the nation itself. It was here in the winter of 1778 to 79, 1 year after Valley Forge, that a third of General Washington's Patriot Army spent the winter. But the story of Putnam Memorial actually began 20 months earlier in April 1777. It was then that 2,000 British soldiers and loyalists made a 47-mile, 3-day inland march to burn the Patriot storage facilities in Danbury. There, the British Army burned thousands of tents, countless items of clothing, and tons of food supplies. To ensure such a loss of provisions by an inland raid never happened again, Washington dispatched his troops to winter quarters in Redding to protect Danbury and the Hudson River Valley. The Redding location was divided into 3 sub-camps. Putnam Memorial was the main camp. The men began arriving at the site in December 1778. The hilly wooded site offered protection, wood for hut construction, and fuel for heat. The stream that provided clean, sufficient water for the troops still flows today. The men stayed in tents while they set to work constructing the 116 huts on the site. By January, the huts were complete. The men prepared to face the cold New England winter which loomed before them. General Israel Putnam directed this camp and all of the Patriot Army in western Connecticut. Putnam was literally a legend in his own time for his exploits in the French and Indian War and for the Battle of Bunker Hill. Not long after the troops arrived, there was unrest in the main camp due to food and supply shortages. General Washington heard of these shortages and inquired to the colonial deputy clothier about promised provisions to the Connecticut troops.
January 8th, 1779. It has been represented to me that the troops of Connecticut are in great want of shirts, stockings, and shoes. G. Washington.
Angered by the lack of necessities and delays in pay, many men prepared to march to the State House in Hartford to demand compensation. But Putnam would have none of it. Twice the age of most of the men, he quelled the uprising by arguing that if he could live with the same deprivation, then they, able young men, should be able to bear up. And they did. The long winter stood before them. Food was inconsistent, cold weather dominated, and boredom prevailed. Life in winter camp was uncomfortable. The huts were crowded, the fireplaces were smoky. The winter days were short, the nights were long. In February 1779, General Putnam, while inspecting troops in southwest Connecticut, was nearly captured by a surprise British raid. After staying the night in Knapp's Tavern in Greenwich, Putnam had word early in the morning of February 26, 1779, that the British were after him, and he was a keen prize for them. Putnam made a crafty escape from the tavern and rode his horse down a stone stairway where no one dared to follow. The angry British watched as he fled. Putnam fired a verbal volley of curses at his attackers.
You dirty redcoats can't get me.
They answered with a volley of gunfire, one shot piercing his hat. Sculptor Anna Hyatt Huntington captured Putnam's escape in her larger-than-life bronze, which stands today at the Visitor Center here at Putnam Memorial. Through the winter, the camp matured. A bakery was built on the upper road, along with the officers' quarters, a blacksmith shop, and storage facilities. Spring inevitably arrived. The warmer weather brought relief to the men encamped here. Snow gave way to mud, buds gave way to leaves. As the end of March 1779 approached, the Canadian and New Hampshire regiments left camp for new assignments. In early May, the 2nd Connecticut Brigade left the camp. And finally, on May 27, 1779, the last brigade, the 1st Connecticut, marched west to protect the Hudson Highlands. After the troops moved out, the site was never again used by the military. Slowly, nature reclaimed the site. First grasses, then shrubs, and finally trees grew up among the ruins. More than 100 years after its abandonment, the Reading camp was purchased in 1887 for the creation of a memorial. By 1888, the 42-foot-high granite obelisk was erected. The tower gates were completed, and the entry road was under construction. Today, the tumble-down chimneys at the park are enduring landmarks of that remarkable time more than 230 years ago, and to the fortitude of the men who fought and suffered to forge the nation we enjoy today. Your visit to Putnam Memorial should include all three elements of the park. Here in the Visitor Center, you'll find interpretive kiosks and site maps of the memorial grounds. Then travel along the park's historic roads. You'll pass the obelisk, the tumble-down chimneys of the Fireback Row, and the upper camp where supporting buildings were located. And finally, visit the museum, which showcases artifacts uncovered through years of archaeological digs. There is also a life-size diorama which depicts camp life in December 1778. Thank you for visiting Putnam Memorial State Park. The Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection thanks the friends and neighbors of Putnam Memorial State Park for their continued support and for making many of the displays and this program possible.